like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right, so we're back, and tonight we're going to be breaking down a Monday Night Football game that honestly left me kind of baffled.
Oh, yeah.
Broncos, Browns, final score 41-32. Broncos win. Sounds pretty normal, right?
Yeah, at first glance.
But then you start looking at the numbers, and it's like, wait a minute. How did this even happen? Both teams with crazy offensive numbers, but the score just doesn't really seem to tell the whole story.
Yeah, I mean, it's not every day you see a team dominate in yardage and time of possession, but still walk away with an L, right? Like, it makes you think about those classic football debates. Is moving the chains always the same as putting points on the board?
Right. Okay, so let's dive into the stats here. Jameis Winston, 497 passing yards, 4 touchdowns.
Whoa.
A franchise record for the Browns. You'd think
Right.
that's a quarterback having a career day, right?
For sure.
But then you look closer. 3 interceptions.
Whew.
2 of them taken it back for touchdowns, pick sixes. It's like he was a highlight reel, but like both good and bad at the same time.
Yeah, that's that gunslinger dilemma, right? They can make those incredible throws, thread the needle like nobody's business, but then that risk, well, sometimes it backfires. Especially against a defense like Denver's, they're opportunistic, ready to capitalize.
And Winston even owned up to it after the game, saying, "The team doesn't deserve that. I know I'm better than this." Seems like he knows he's walking a tightrope out there.
Yeah, accountability is huge, especially in that position. But I gotta ask, like, why do you think those picks happened? Bad decisions by Winston? Or were there other things going on? Maybe the O-line not giving him enough time, receivers not getting open?
Good questions. I mean, he definitely seemed to be under pressure a lot. And speaking of pressure, let's switch gears and talk about Bo Nix.
All right, the rookie.
Not as flashy of a night, 294 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Pretty solid, but definitely overshadowed by, the whole Winston show. But he did lead the game-winning drive.
After throwing a pretty crucial interception late in the game.
Right. It's funny, though, because Sean Payton actually took the blame for that one, saying it was his fault, the play call. Do you think that kind of leadership, publicly supporting a young quarterback like that actually makes a difference long-term?
Totally. Taking the heat off a rookie like that builds confidence, loyalty, but also makes you wonder, what was Peyton thinking with that play call in the first place? Was it risky from the start, or did something go wrong in the execution?
Tough to say without, really analyzing the film, but one thing's for sure, coaching decisions, especially in those clutch moments, can completely change the direction of a game.
For sure. Now, before we go too deep on strategy, we got to talk about the revenge game narrative.
Oh, yeah?
Jerry Jeudy, traded from Denver to Cleveland earlier this season, went absolutely nuts against his former team. 235 receiving yards. That's an NFL record when going up against your old squad.
Wow.
Jonathan Cooper, linebacker for the Broncos, even said Jerry Jeudy wasn't playing around now. Did you see that fire in his eyes? Oh, you could tell. He came into this game with something to prove. Makes you wonder, right? How much does emotion actually play into performance?
Right. And even with the entire Denver crowd booing him, he's like, loved it, wanted to hear it louder. Dude was feeding off that energy.
Some players fold under that kind of pressure. Others, they thrive on it. But even with that amazing performance, someone seemed to have his number.
You're talking about Patrick Surtain II, right? It's wild, these guys. Teammates at Alabama and Denver. And Surtain, the only one who could consistently shut Jeudy down. Do you think, their history played into that? Did he know exactly what Jeudy was going to do before he did it?
It's definitely possible, right? That kind of familiarity, knowing your opponent's tendencies, their strengths, weaknesses, huge asset in coverage, and you can see it in the stats. Jeudy, when covered by anyone else, unstoppable. But against Surtain, production dropped big time. It's like a masterclass in defensive strategy.
Like a chess match. Each move perfectly countering the other.
Exactly. And it brings up an interesting point. We've been talking about individual performances, but maybe the real story here is the matchups, right? Those battles within the battle that often determine who wins.
That's a great point. And speaking of key battles, let's talk about a stat that I think really tells the hidden story of this game. 3rd down conversions.
Oh, yeah, that's where it gets interesting.
3rd down. They call it the money down for a reason. Make or break for the offense. Convert, keep the drive alive. Fail, you're punting.
Exactly.
And the Broncos, incredibly efficient on 3rd down. Bo Nix especially.
Consistently moving the chains, extending drives, eating up the clock. Meanwhile, the Browns, all that yardage, they struggled to convert, especially in the second half.
So they were moving the ball, but stalling when it really mattered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings us to, well, I guess, the elephant in the room, the Browns quarterback situation.
Right. We can't ignore that. Deshaun Watson, their $230 million quarterback, benched for weeks now. And ever since Jameis Winston took over, the offense, well, let's just say it's been a lot more entertaining.
The numbers don't lie, but the question is it sustainable? Is Winston their guy for the long haul, or do they eventually go back to Watson?
Tough call. And this game just throws more fuel on the fire. Winston, huge numbers, but those turnovers, costly.
It's a real dilemma. The Browns are at a crossroads, and that decision, quarterback, that's going to have huge implications for the future of that franchise.
No doubt. And to really show you how wild this game was, one more stat for you. The Browns, they ran 23 more plays than the Broncos, gained 152 more yards.
And still lost by 9 points.
It's almost hard to believe.
Really makes you think, right? What does it actually take to win in football? Is it flashy yards, or is it efficiency, making the most of your opportunities, winning those key battles?
It's almost like the Browns are playing two different games. You know, like 1 minute they're marching down the field, racking up yards, but then they hit the red zone and it all falls apart. Or the defense gives up a huge play.
Yeah, I see what you mean. You got to think about the consequences of that kind of offensive strategy, right?
Yeah.
Throwing deep, taking risks, it's going to lead to turnovers. And turnovers, well, they can completely shift the momentum, put the defense in a tough spot.
Yeah. Like that interception late in the fourth quarter, Winston trying to make something happen, throws a pick, and Broncos cornerback Jaquan McMillian takes it all the way 46 yards for a touchdown. Yeah. That pretty much sealed the deal for Denver.
And it wasn't just that one pick. Earlier in the game, Nick Bonito took another one of Winston's passes, 70 yards for another pick six. Those defensive touchdowns were huge for the Broncos. Gave them a lead the Browns just couldn't overcome.
It's kind of ironic, right? You got these quarterbacks putting up crazy numbers, and then the game comes down to defensive plays.
It just shows you football's a team sport. You can have the best offense in the league, but if your defense can't make stops when it counts, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the Broncos' defense wasn't perfect, but they held their ground. They made the plays when they needed to.
It's all about situational awareness. Recognizing the down and distance, understanding what your opponent's going to do, and making the right decision at the right time.
And maybe that's the big takeaway from this game. It's not just about racking up yards. It's about playing smart, efficient football, understanding that any play could be the one that changes everything.
Couldn't agree more. It's easy to get caught up in those highlights, the big plays, the individual stats. But at the end of the day, football's a game of inches, a game of moments. And the teams that win are the ones that take advantage of those moments and make the fewest mistakes.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to that crazy stat we talked about earlier. Just to remind everyone, the Browns ran 23 more plays than the Broncos and gained 152 more yards.
And still lost by 9 points.
Unbelievable. How do you even explain that?
It's one of those weird stats that just proves how important efficiency and situational football are. The Browns might have had the time of possession and the yardage, but they couldn't turn that into points.
Right. It goes back to what we were talking about, those third down conversions, those turnovers. It's like they were spinning their wheels while the Broncos were finding ways to actually move forward.
Exactly. In football, it's not just about how far you go, it's about how effectively you use that field position to your advantage.
And that brings us right back to the Browns' quarterback problem. After a performance like this where Winston put up huge numbers but also made some big mistakes, where do the Browns go from here?
They've got a tough choice to make. Do they stick with Winston, who's clearly moving the offense, but also prone to those risky throws? Or do they go back to their big investment, Deshaun Watson, who hasn't lived up to the hype yet, but still has that massive contract?
It's all about finding that balance between short-term gains and long-term goals.
And there's no easy answer. It's a decision that'll have a huge impact on the franchise, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
This game really made me rethink what makes a better team. The Browns, on paper, they look dominant. But the Broncos, they found ways to be more efficient, more opportunistic, and in the end, more effective. It just shows you the box score doesn't always tell the whole story.
Exactly, and that's what makes football so great. It's complex, full of little details and unexpected twists and turns. It's a game that makes you think critically, makes you challenge your assumptions, and really appreciate the strategy involved.
It really is a lesson, huh?
Yeah.
Yardage doesn't equal wins. The Browns were moving the ball, but the Broncos, they were playing chess, setting themselves up, making those game-winning plays.
Yeah, totally. It's like quality over quantity, right? The Browns had the volume, but the Broncos, they had the precision. That's what wins games.
And for the Broncos, this win, This could be a turning point for their season. 8-5 puts them right in that playoff hunt. They've shown they can pull out those tough wins, even when their offense isn't, clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, their defense has been solid all season. And if Bo Nix keeps growing, learning from those mistakes, they're going to be a tough team to beat down the stretch.
For sure. But on the other side, the Browns, well, they're going into their bye week with a lot to think about. What changes do they need to make on both sides of the ball to stop these shootouts from happening?
The big question mark, of course, is the quarterback situation. Can Jameis Winston, can he cut down on those turnovers but still play that aggressive style? Or do they go back to Deshaun Watson, hoping he can find that form he had before the suspension?
It's a gamble either way. High stakes. Really curious to see what they decide.
This game, it was like a perfect example of just how unpredictable the NFL can be, right? Defied expectations, made us question everything we thought we knew about winning. And honestly, it left us with more questions than answers.
But that's what makes it so exciting, right?
Yeah.
Keeps you on the edge of your seat, makes you rethink everything, reminds you that anything can happen, especially on a Monday night.
Totally. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Broncos' win over the Browns, I think the biggest lesson for me is don't just look at the stats. Don't just focus on individual performances. Look deeper at the strategy, the key moments, those little battles that decide the game.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe next time we see these two teams, the Browns will flip the script, turn those yards into points, show everyone they're more than just a team that can put up big numbers. We'll have to wait and see.
Until then, stay sharp, keep watching, because the NFL, it never disappoints.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next week to break down another exciting matchup. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deeper into the world of sports.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have the ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.